I'm Gary Paquette, and I am in technology asset management. A little bit of background: I've been designing, building, and creating and implementing technology asset management, or TAM solutions, for over 25 years. Yes, I started when I was 12. I know. What I'm going to walk you through today is a little bit of what happens from managing the complexity and costs and the benefits of technology asset management. One of the things I always like to associate with this, and it's a little bit of anything in life, has to do with what I call situational awareness. Unless you know what you have, and it's the perception of everything around you, the environment, the people, what you're doing with things, how they're doing it, and what is it going to what are the risks of what you're doing moving forward. And that's what situational awareness brings you. So it's the gathering of information, which you all need to do for asset management. Understanding the information. It's another big source of problems for us. And then what are you going to do with that information moving forward? And that's a lot of what I'm going to deal with today. And situational awareness is real important, especially when you, when you really don't know what's coming behind you. So we always want to be able to look behind us and look forward. Can you all see the shark? Okay. Those are our users. So it is important. So the key factors to your success is going to be dealing with all of the parts and moving parts of technology asset management. One of the key factors is assigning effective roles and responsibilities. And what does that mean? You have to empower the people who are going to put this in place. It's always nice to say, hey, I'm going to do this. Somebody has to be empowered to do it. Executive management has to be behind it. People downstream have to understand what you're doing. There's a lot of key parts that are touching your environment. Security is going to be involved. The networking people are involved. The desktop people are involved. Finance is involved. Everybody's touching this, so everybody has to have responsibilities within the organization to get this done. Again, you don't want to do this by committee. One of the problems that we always see with committees is that it's a little bit of the Dilbert scenario. You're in meetings all the time and nothing gets done. Establishing your goals and requirements is one of the main problems that we see with a lot of people, that we try and help them get started, get kick-started with asset management. Being able to understand, why are you doing this? Sometimes your hair is on fire. Somebody's knocked at the door and goes, hey, I'm Oracle. I'm here for an audit. Or somebody comes in and says, I need to do an operating system upgrade. What does that actually mean? What are the soft costs? What are the hard costs? What am I getting involved in? Can I actually change the operating system on leased assets? So everything has to do with what you're going to be doing with the data and what are the requirements within your organization. Now, often you'll have to actually ask other people within the infrastructure, but you have to ask the right questions, and don't be afraid to ask the questions. Strategize on your solutions to drive success. You have a lot of data in your environment. It's on spreadsheets, it's in databases, it's on Post-its. By the way, we can't consume Post-its in any solution today. We're working on that. It could be handwritten notes on the napkin. The thing is that gathering all of the information, and you have great tools sometimes in place, you just need to know how to leverage it and what information is available to strategize on better using that data and how you're going to reconcile that information. And that's the reconciling the data itself. So how do I get from understanding what I've got in my environment, how it relates to your procurement system, to the ERP system, how's it linked to your fixed asset system, how's it linked to service management? Everybody has pieces of information. The winner is going to be the one who actually can reconcile this data, merge it together, and make heads and tails out of it. And that's how we get to the normalizing the data to make it usable. You know, I've lived through the horror stories of gathering data through all kinds of technology. They call it, discovery technology. And you look at it and it says your CPU is type 721. Who knows what 721 is? Well, besides me. Well, Basically you want to be able to have information that is usable. So your system has to be able to take the information that gets gathered, has to go through like an AI engine if you want, and put it into plain English. Typically when we reconcile up against ERP systems, a fixed asset system, we have to actually know which attributes are going to marry to the other one and get that information to work together. Then I can get the procurement data. Who's using that system? So how do I get that out of the HR system or your directory services? So normalizing the data is one of the big key factors of what you're going to be looking for in an asset management solution. Why? You're going to end up with so much data and nowhere to be found is the answer to your question. And that's one of the big problems. The other one is sharing data. Everybody likes to build silos within the organization today. Why? Well, I live in my own little world. But if you think about it, if you're going to be the technology asset manager, and by the way, if you notice, I say technology asset management instead of IT asset management. As we move forward, and I'll go through this in the presentation, less and less technology now is actually driven by IT. Okay, take a look at IoT. Take a look at the wall plugs that are now automated. Most of them have apps now to control your lights at home, the lock on the door. I have wireless capabilities with my phone to open and close the garage doors. And I get alerts from when my kids don't close them. So I can close them from Orlando all the way back down to San Diego. So data sharing is important. And bridging the silos is the important part between how do I actually get the finance department to work with the IT department, to work with the desktop people, and get all of those systems to be able to share a common platform. And a lot of you want to be able to claim that you have the trusted data source of this reconciled data. And then sharing it also with service management. You hear about the CMDB all the time and about CIs. Well, service management would love to be able to see the information that you get from the system itself. So when they're working with a user, I can actually bring up the record of that specific asset, that device that they're on, and see how it's configured, see the software on it, see what the hardware is, and how it's changed over time. Because we all know that when you make a call to the help desk, you never did anything to it. It broke by itself. It's magical how these things work today. And also, I want to have effective change management. And technology asset management will drive that for you, if you think about it. Since we're picking up the changes over time, if you feed that to change management, you'll be able to actually see what has a specific work order and reconcile that up against that work order and see if that change is happening within the SLA that's been provided out there, or at least gauge the milestones. To give you an example, we have customers where they went from 32 data centers down to 17 on a data center consolidation project. So first they needed to understand what they had, and then as equipment was coming offline and services were coming offline, they wanted to see come up on the other side. So it was going through the change management system. And when it caught an anomaly, it would actually kick off a workflow. So again, asset management is the foundation for anything with your technology assets. So the biggest question on all of this is like, yeah, technology asset management or TAM is great. I want to do it. Where do I start? The first thing you want to do is control the chaos. Anybody who's in technology asset management and TAM should get a T-shirt that says, I control chaos. Because why? That's what you're going to be doing. It's just a hectic mess out there for most people. So the age-old question, well, we're going to start. In the beginning, if you have to understand a little bit where TAM started, oops, I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Where TAM started, it started all the way back from the mainframe days. You could ask any mainframe people, a person in the room, what the applications were on it, what were the MIPS, what were my chargebacks. Remember the days when people cared about chargebacks? Everything was known to a T. Then we got into the client-server world, and all of a sudden things exploded and it was out of control. So they took the mainframe people and said, you're going to manage the technology assets from that perspective. So that's basically where we're going to start, is how do you establish the technology baseline? And the technology baseline is the foundation to your house. Would you ever build a house on sand? No. We see what happens when you see those hurricanes and some of the islands and everything topples over. Your foundation is going to be the key to your success. And that's what we call the technology baseline. For us, that means finding out everything that exists in the environment. And I'm talking from the data center all the way down to the desktop. How many switches do I have? How many servers? How many VMs? How are they configured? How are they changing over time? And establishing that baseline normally can take, depending on the size of your organization, can take a week to months. It really depends on your infrastructure. I'll walk into customers on a regular basis and we'll say, do you know about your network infrastructure? And they look at you like you just asked them the biggest puzzle in the world. And they'll go, no. Then you go ask the network people, we think we have this. Then you go see the CIO and how many servers do you have? And I go, we think. Now everybody's thinking and nobody's got an answer. So establishing the baseline is saying, okay, once I get to a certain point, I see the noise quietening down. From the discovery and inventory process, getting information from other systems, we're starting to see a level of consistency. Now you've just established point one. Gathering all the pertinent information you can. Can I go get my contracts? Can I get that electronically? Can I get a list of my users, directory services? Can I get information from the contract side? How are the warranties kicking in? Gather all the information you can, because that's going to be key to the success too. Then gather the data from all of the assets, consolidate and reconcile. So what does that mean? As I was saying before, you go to the order management system, your fixed asset system, all of the sources that you have data in. People always say, well, what about if I have SCCM? Is that my asset database? No, it's a partial piece of the information, but get everything to work together and put it in one system. The HR system is also key. We're starting to see more and more companies where HR has access to technology asset management. Why? On exit interview. They want to know who has what. One of the big jokes I always tell, if you're in high tech for the last couple of years or so, or decades, is always ask them how many laptops that are at home, they have at home, and that's the number of jobs you've had at different companies. And that's pretty, and that's not unusual. A lot of people here know exactly what I'm saying. Often it's not even the cost of the device, it's the intellectual property that left with it. They have access to information they shouldn't have after they've left the company. So HR is using it more. Service management is using it more. And we want to pull in information from the order management side. So now that you've done step one, establish the baseline, pull in the data, and then put everything into one system, you can actually move on to the next step, which is data analytics, what we call asset intelligence. So what does asset intelligence mean? Well, understanding, as an example, all of your vendors. If I'm buying stuff from Dell, and I'm buying stuff from here, and I'm buying stuff from there and everywhere, how are you going to negotiate? Are you going to get a better price if you're going to buy onesies and twosies, or if I'm buying 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 at one place? So if you can start standardizing on what you're doing from a platform perspective, now it allows you to start negotiating. Again, it has to do with cost savings. Asset intelligence is also being able to make business decisions from the ongoing history and the information and auditing that over time. So your asset management system should be keeping the data fresh. You should be refreshing, that system should be refreshing itself typically on a weekly basis. And you're going to be seeing the changes over time. And it's also going to be allowing you to also find things that are what we call missing in action. I've seen something before. It's been 30 days. Where are you? Okay? And things do disappear. Now, there could be a changing status. It could be an inventory or it broke. But your change management system or your asset management system, which is your trusted data source, should contain the status itself, and you should be updating the statuses. Where are who's using it and why? And it's always a big concern to figure out what applications are being used at the desktop. Big money saving from a SAM perspective. A lot of people, when you look at software asset management, which we're going to get into, need to understand also what people are doing with their systems. It's nice to say I'm going to buy all of this for everybody, but at the same time, is everybody using it? So you want to be able to make the decisions based on the information coming from the system. So you want to be able to track things along the way, how they're being used, and why they're using it. Should they have access to that system or that service? Where are the assets located? Big question all the time. So your asset management system should be able to automate that for you. There's a lot of ways today. Technology is getting a lot smarter. A lot of the older legacy asset management systems, like I used to build 15, 20 years ago, didn't have that capability. Why? The data sources weren't there. Now we have the data sources. We have the means of actually being able to geolocate something electronically. As an example, a subnet, prefixing of a host name, an FQDN as an example, or the domain that it's on. There's a lot of different methodologies that we use, linking it back to the core systems. And I can actually pull a location in and merge that in for that system. The other factor that is really important that we're seeing a lot of companies worry about and they're asked to do on the TAM side is for tax purposes. If you're going to depreciate your assets, if they're leased, the taxing on those assets, you need to be able to track that. So it's a key component to the asset management side. Controlling maintenance renewals. How many here know exactly why they're renewing maintenance, or are they just signing a check? And the answer typically is they're just signing a check. We had one customer that had 3,400 edge routers with a whole bunch of service providers. Finance was sending a check to be able to have these circuits connected to the internet, okay, at a state level. The IT side knew of all of the edge routers. We were able to provide them with the service and circuit IDs, link that to the finance department, and finance department was overpaying by $1.2 million circuits that no longer existed over the years. And they didn't know how many years they've been doing that. So, that within about 10 days of reconciling the data and marrying things together on contract and on maintenance side, we're able to see and get those savings. Why renew maintenance if you're not going to reuse something? Maybe you're going to retire equipment. We see that all the time. Same thing on software. One of the big cost savings on the SAM side when we get to software asset management has to do with maintenance renewals. If you're not using it, or you're decommissioning it, why am I paying to renew it? So it's a direct cost savings to the bottom line. Security is one of the biggest issues that we're seeing right now with TAM. Microsoft, about 10 days ago, issued a patch to fix a big Intel problem. You've probably heard about it. The CPU has a leak. Hackers can actually get into the computer system through a CPU exploit. Well, Microsoft came out with a patch. How many here know exactly all the systems that got patched in the last 10 days within their own company? Probably not many. Our customers can. But more importantly, you want a system or a solution that's going to be able to give you that level of granularity. The other problem is on the software side. Equifax, they had an Apache Strut issue. Your asset management system should have that information, and within 5 seconds, any company should be able to answer that question. Do I have a security risk within my environment? From the software side, from the operating system side, and also from the hardware side. The other biggest risk that we see on from an asset intelligence perspective is finding things nobody knows about. Why? Everybody knows change management always works. Everybody follows the rules. We end up finding on average about 3 to 4% of technology that nobody knows about, which is dramatic when you think about it. That means there's people that are actually adding things to the network that haven't been secured, haven't been locked down, haven't been patched within the environment. With our capabilities that we've been seeing and working with customers, one of the things that we've seen is a lot of people aren't getting hacked into anymore. They're getting hacked out of. The actual break is from inside their own four walls. So security is big on TAM. And if you're all technology asset management people or ITAM people within the room, this is where you're growing your skill set. And the skill set is not very well known at this point. You know, it's a valuable resource in most organizations that's overlooked. The other big play with asset intelligence, we see a lot of this, is in the mergers and acquisitions. You're buying another company. What do they have? Now, they always do a financial due diligence, but when does technology come into play? IT never get asked. They say, hey, we bought a company. Here's the keys. Now what you should be able to do is say, listen, as part of the business process within the company, we want to participate in any M&A activity. Same thing from an acquisition perspective. I was working with one customer that was getting acquired by a publicly owned company, and they needed to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. And when they asked for a Sarbanes-Oxley report, they all ran in the opposite direction. It was like putting a drop of oil inside of water. It just scattered. Everybody just scattered. So there's a lot of good reasons why you have to be able to do the data analytics, and your TAM solution, your ITAM solution, should be doing this for you, and then you can generate the reports. So there's different data sets for different use and purposes. And what I mean by that is that you want to be able to have the data needed for different parts of the organization. The HR person on an exit interview just needs to know what the person has. Make, model, serial number, and then I'm good. Service management wants to know the configuration of the hardware, the operating system, the version of the operating system, and the applications on it. The facility side need to know how many computers are in a room to know how much power they need to generate, or if it's in the data center, how many racks and how much power and how much heat is going to be dissipated. Excuse me. So all of the capabilities of assigning data, everybody says keep the data small, but again, it depends on your purpose of using the data, so you need a broad scope of information to serve the business. Some of the other purposes is being able to do assessments within your organization. I want to assess, remember the exploding batteries in laptops? Well, wouldn't it be nice just pressing a report and saying, here's all the devices that have the Sony exploding batteries. I could address that. So that's an assessment, an example of an assessment. You want to be able to also, from a data perspective, is mitigate the risk that you're going to have before starting any project. What does that mean? We were working with some customers just recently that were going through a Windows XP / whatever to Windows 10. 1 year later, $2 million into it, upgrade failed. Why? Nobody had the data from day one to understand what was going to happen on an upgrade. They didn't understand the services and applications. They didn't understand if the hardware would support it. They didn't understand some of the equipment they had was already 4 years old. Why upgrade it when they could just replace it? So these are some of the things that you want to be able to do from before starting any project. You've established your baseline. You've normalized the data. Now I can actually take a look at what is it going to take to do an operating system upgrade. And that's from a soft cost and a hard cost perspective. There's both. You have to take a look at it from a financial side of things. Data center consolidations, like I was saying before, that's a big, big move for a lot of organizations. Or they're doing co-locates. Or what am I going to move to the cloud? Or to an AWS Azure type platform. So you have to have the information to make great business decisions. Technology refresh. You know, we see it all the time. I'm going to take a refresh of every 4 years or 3 years on technology. What is that old? We've gone into organizations where the customers come back to us and say, hey, you found 2 servers that we disposed of 3 years ago. And you go, we don't invent the data. We only collect the information and report on it. And they went, took a look, and there's the 2 servers sitting in a rack that were supposed to be disposed of, decommissioned, and out of the building. And they were still physically there, hosting an old finance system that people had access to. Always interesting to see. If you're getting audited on any side, you can have all kinds of audits. The ones we see the most is the BSA, what we call the software police. They can walk into any organization and say, hey, I'm here to audit your software. Last year, the BSA did 460 audits, spot audits. And it could be for Microsoft, it could be for Adobe, it could be for Oracle, and now you're scrambling. And you don't want to be in scrambling mode all the time. Compliance is the same thing. You want to be able to answer questions before it becomes disruptive. Anybody who's managing their assets well, their job at the end of the day should be reading the news at the end of the day. Right now, most of us are in firefighting mode. We had one customer that said, hey, we need to make sure that a certain browser is not installed. So we said, well, go into your asset management system and just pull out a report. And that's what you want to be able to do. It serves multiple disciplines within the organization. Security we talked about. Again, another purpose and use for the data. We always engage with the security people because they're the ones that are always against that technology asset management. They're always against TAM being in place. Why? Well, they kind of feel that as a threat. Oh, you need credentials. You need this. I go, doesn't this outweigh you configuring the system to collect your data within your environment for your purpose? And then they kind of say, well, after they see the information, they go, where have you been all my life? Because it really reduces their risks on the security side. Software asset management is another purpose of the data. Once you collect the data, I need to be able to link that to the contracts, to the agreements, to the license agreements. That way I can find out the entitlements, which is the relationship between the contract and then the system or the users. And then the end result is clicking a button and say, I'm short this many licenses, or I'm over-provisioned, or I'm kind of flush. HR, so the data set for HR, again, is different. And the biggest one we've been seeing lately is disaster recovery. We've seen it where there's been a major hurricane, there's a flooding in the data center, nobody knew what was there. So we had certain customers that would just basically say, restore the database, press a button. For that because we could track the locations, we were able to generate a report that gave them all of the servers, all the virtual machines, all the switches, routers, and sensors that were configured, all of the applications and services for every server in that data center. Within half an hour, they had a report done and completed. They had a project plan within the next couple of days, went to the insurance company, got a new location for a data center, and they were actually starting to get back into operational state. So another really great purpose of the information. Now, this is one of my favorite slides, and people who know me like me showing this all the time. I know I like showing this. ITAM, or Technology Asset Management, is bridging the gap between finance and the technology side. The CIO from an operational perspective, and then the business side. Because typically the CIO and the CFO, they have an agreement from day one that they're not going to talk to each other. And it's pretty clear in most organizations. So they're fighting for budget. I'm trying to validate. We're doing capacity planning. I need another ATM switch, or I need another enterprise switch, and it's $60,000. Well, ITAM or TAM should be able to tell you at a click of a button, this is my capacity. If I'm going to add another 150 users, this is what it's going to cost. Why? I know the location, I know the footprint, I know the space in a rack, I know how much power it's going to consume, and I also know the cost. And the existing switches I have all the free ports. TAM actually delivers that to you. So again, you're bridging, you're getting a clear, accurate view of one trusted data source to be able to bridge the gap. Finance also does the same thing too. We have a lot of organizations that finance is actually the ones driving your ITAM strategies. Why? They don't know. And if they're a publicly traded company and your fixed assets don't match what you have, you're misrepresenting your finances. And I don't care what anybody says, orange is not the new black. And the Department of Justice is working hard now on these compliance side, like on Sarbanes-Oxley, on starting to enforce it. They're looking for key cases. And they've made that publicly. They said that publicly, by the way. So it provides the information needed also to monitor and measure TCO. Now, a lot of people, and you'll hear this, even Gartner, and they're probably going to hate me for it, they always say total cost of ownership. Well, I can't really affect your ownership, but I can actually affect your total cost of operations. The operational cost is what's going to be controlled through TAM. Why? Well, if I'm measuring and I'm seeing how things are changing, and if I'm building special projects, or if I'm doing an upgrade, or I'm moving, or I'm adding people, if I can see what my operational costs are, that's how I'm going to determine exactly what it's going to take for those projects. Lowering your operating costs because of complexity. Typically, misinformation is always propagated first. Oh, somebody's doing this project, did you hear about this? And I don't know if they're going to pull it off, because everybody's negative, because everybody knows that there's no information to work off of. So we want to be able to expose that. Critical information, driving alerts to mitigate risk. When there's a project that's going bad, your TAM system is going to be tracking what's happening on a regular basis. And if you're not seeing the progress that you're expecting, especially if you have, how many people out here outsourced or part of their IT from a deployment perspective? How do you gauge what the outsourcer's doing for you? They're telling you, here's a report. Based on what? So if you don't use any kind of TAM product or ITAM product in your environment, how do you gauge what they're doing for you and how that's working from a milestone and project perspective? You also track the corporate investments of technology through its asset life cycle. That was a tough one at the end of the day. And what does that basically mean? You want to be able to know from the time something was ordered that it's in transit, from when it's in transit, it got into the loading area. From the receiving process, you want to be able to measure that and its changes over time, all the way to its disposal. So we've worked with a lot of manufacturers, and you should be asking for the same thing if you can get what we call the birth certificate of a system. If you can get the birth certificate, you know exactly what you're expecting for that system. And some vendors do that, by the way. If you ask them for a birth certificate, they'll tell you make, model, serial number, how it was configured, if there's any special configuration on it. And now you've got that record directly from the vendor. You put that into your asset management system. Now you've got your baseline already established for you. Track the statuses over time, and then all the soft costs. If you're leasing assets, you know that you're supposed to send it back the same way you got it. Well, what did it look like? So again, another purpose for it. And the reason behind that, it's interesting how leasing companies work when we work with them. If you're short on what is inside the system from a software or hardware perspective, they'll charge you for it. Now, even though you've paid for it over the last 3 years, they're going to charge you for the shortage. If you've added something to it, they don't tell you. Okay, and it goes to a chop shop. And the chop shop is allowed to keep everything that you've added inside the system, and that's their gravy on top of the fee they get paid. So it's interesting because you go to these chop shops where they take computers apart, and you go, what's this rack? And that goes, that's all the extra stuff. So there's a lot of money being disposed of that you're throwing away without knowing what you had. So tracking this from a life cycles perspective is always important. So just little key tidbits of how this can actually benefit the organization from a cost perspective. So your cost savings. So the analysts for years have been saying that you can save X amount of dollars. I don't know if you remember about 15, 20 years ago, everyone was touting that if you actually put technology asset management, your cost savings was $3,842 per asset. That was the magic number. And everybody goes down and I go, oh, I can save that much. I got 10,000 assets. I'm saving $4 million. And I go, how do you do that? How do you actually save that money? And so nobody could back it up. So what it comes down to now these days, if you think about it, the reason what you're going to be able to save is on maintenance. Also analyzing through the information you're getting back from the service desk system, what are your vendors or product lines that are most problematic or from a cost perspective? Is the technology the problem from a cost perspective, or is it the user? No, it's not me. Oops, it's not me. It's usually my computer that's the problem. But that's just me. So one of the things that we want to be able to say, and nobody's put numbers around this these days because it fluctuates based on your own organization, how and what you're buying as far as technology. We're more and more getting into the mobile market. So a lot of people have their offices shut down and they say work from home. Those assets still have to be tracked. Okay? Now it's even worse. Now you don't have direct control over them. They're somewhere else. And because of all the cloud applications, Office 365 and everything else, you don't need VPNs anymore. So how do I get that information back to the core system? So the complexity now is actually getting worse and worse, which affects your cost of operations. So you got to make sure you can actually isolate those. They basically are now saying that you can save up to 15% with a solid hardware and software asset management solution in place. Now that's starting to make more sense, okay? Because the cost of technology has dropped in certain areas. Software is now more of a service in a lot of areas, so now it makes it a lot easier from a billing perspective. You know, take what Microsoft did. Microsoft wanted to solve two problems. One, everything was getting pirated. Everybody was pirating the operating system and the applications. Well, now with Office 365 and the way they license, they activate the Windows environment, you can't get around the system like you used to anymore. You can't go buy CDs on the street with little pieces of paper that had a code on it. You can't do that anymore. So a lot of these things now, a lot of the technology is helping you on those cost savings as long as you implement them. On the effects of the data center, we want to be able to see where the biggest cost savings are there. It's amazing how many people have VM environments that they have no idea what they have anymore. We go to organizations, 20% of the VMs are turned off. Your liabilities don't disappear because it's turned off. That's like saying taking a physical server and if it's off, I don't have to count it. Okay? A VM is exactly like a physical system without having a box. So it has an operating system that has costs associated to it, and there's applications on it. So you have to be able to identify every little part of your organization in the data center, down to the switch, to your routers, your sensors, your PDUs, your power distribution units, your battery backup units. Everything has bearing an effect within your organization. So when the data center goes down, guess what? Most people's workstations start to be affected too because the applications are being served by the data center. Doesn't get any easier now with cloud environments. Anybody here who's doing ITAM and has a cloud environment, their biggest headache is, I've taken one headache and I moved my headache somewhere else, thinking that it's somebody else's problem. And they're going, I'm still responsible. From a liability perspective on your licenses to the services they're delivering, and then you've got your developers who spool up things without telling anybody. Why? They have access to it. There's still liabilities involved. So you want to be able to manage everything from a cost effectiveness in the data center, your network infrastructure, and your desktop infrastructure. And another example of cost savings is nearly every network printer is able to tell you electronically its page count. So now what companies are doing using ITAM is they're collecting all the information on the page counts of the printers from week to week or month to month. And they're isolating all the ones that aren't being used. If I'm printing 3 copies a month and I'm paying $400 a month for that massive big Xerox printer as an example, or Ricoh printer, I mean, you know how much that is a page? It's $100 a page. So you got to look at how can I lower my cost by analyzing the data, even on the networking side. And it's the same thing on desktop, all the way down to the desktop. And a lot of people go, well, ITAM, yeah, I do my desktop. And I don't do my network, and I don't do my data center. Well, guess what? You can't work with partial data. It has to be the whole gambit. The biggest problem that we have is you can't manage what you don't know about. Okay? It's like securing your home, if you think about it. When they came in to put a home security system, they asked me how many windows I had and how many doors. Now, if I've got 20 windows and I told them 16, and I know I have 3 doors, I'm still short on some windows in my house. So I'm just kind of fooling myself about what I know about at that point. And guess what? Whoever's going to break in is going to check where the sensors are. And if there's missing sensors on the window, they can tell. And that's how you're going to get in. So knowledge about the unknown is one of the biggest problems ITAM does solve. And that's from a liability perspective again, and from the security side of things. And technology landscape is getting more and more complex. So like I say, the advent of IoT, lights are on the network, power plugs are on the network, webcams are on the network, everything's connected to the network. That's why if you take a look at subnets now, before we used to see maybe 80 devices per subnet, we're seeing 150, 170, 200 devices. Why? Everything connects. People come in with their watches and connect to the Wi-Fi. So everybody wants to be able to understand how to start manage that new complexity. And the only people who can affect that is the ITAM, the TAM people have to be involved in the decision-making factors of the technology that's being purchased. Why? Always make sure you buy things that are instrumented. And what does that mean? Something can find it, and then find it, you have to be able to inventory it. Because without that information, that thing is invisible on your network. And it's the breach, that's how a lot of people, the hackers, are smart, or they're wise to this stuff. You can easily hack into these things just by connecting to the devices, and then you're on the network. And like I said before, many technologies now have nothing to do with IT. So, again, TAM has gotten bigger than IT. It includes all of your assets. It has everything to do with what you have connected to your network. And then you also want to manage what you have off network. Because like I say, most of us now are working from home directly, and you have to take that into consideration. Insurance companies have been doing it for years, where the agents or the adjusters are actually working from home, and they're just road warriors, but you still need that information. So keep that in mind when you're building your asset management system. That's basically it for me. I want to thank you for staying awake at the end of the day, and let's stay safe, technology safe out there. Thank you.